Yeah.
So the study on Chile was something that I was personally very interested to do for a number of reasons. I've been really interested to look at what's happening in Chile because there seems to have been very rapid change, albeit from quite a traditional point in terms of their educational style. There seems to be an awful lot happening over the last few years, and I've been really interested in the speed of that change. But also, I've been very interested in the extent to which the government seems to have played a part and a role in making that change happen. And there have been two key government interventions in Chile over the last 15 years that appeared from the outside to have had quite an interesting effect on triggering and inspiring change in engineering education. And I was particularly interested in the second of those, which is called Engineering 2030, which is actually financed by the Ministry of Finance in Chile rather than the Ministry of Education. And usually these kind of educational interventions are sponsored by the Higher Education Ministry. But actually, this was very much focused on economic development. And it was looking to engineering schools as incubators of technology, innovation, talent, so that the country could drive their economy forward on the basis of technology innovation. And they were deliberately investing in educational reform in engineering schools. So those were the reasons that I was really interested to look at what was happening, asking the question of, what are the best schools in Chile doing in engineering education, and what's the focus of their attention in terms of change, but also looking at the question of what role does the government or has the government played in supporting that change, and what can the wider community learn from that? Because a lot of countries across the world are very interested obviously, in supporting educational change, not just at an institutional level, but actually at a national level. And I felt there was some insight there from what was happening in Chile that perhaps other countries could learn from.
Okay. So what did they actually do, Roos? You say it's a top-down initiative on innovation. So how did they implement that, and how did it go down to the academic staff? How were they involved in the change process? What was in the middle?
Okay, well, I think the way that they handled, or the way the government handled this particular intervention called Engineering 2030, I think was quite carefully thought through, and I think it really has been very successful. But one of the things they did, it was a top-down change in one sense, but actually they asked for bids. So the universities had to come to them and actually state their case. This is what we want to do, and we want to make a change. There was substantial amount of funding attached to that. But they also encouraged them, for example, to benchmark their programs against international exemplars. And I think that process had a really profound effect. And it was a staged project. So actually the group of universities who benchmarked themselves internationally was larger than the group of universities that subsequently were funded to support the change. So actually quite a large group of universities across Chile had, or a group of engineering schools across Chile had this funding. And I think that really opened the eyes of a lot of faculty to what's happening internationally. And a lot of them, for example, went to some of the top rated research-led institutions and really started to see that the world was moving on, that the last 10 or 20 years had seen some quite profound changes with, for example, experiential learning, project-based learning, really starting to be immersed much more in the core curriculum. And I think that process really had started the ball rolling of a culture change within a lot of schools within Chile. That said, actually, perhaps what we haven't got, what we've got at the moment, perhaps isn't perfect, isn't world leading, and perhaps there's something that we need to learn elsewhere. And I think one of the other things that's been really pivotal at some of the schools in Chile has been the leadership. And there are key deans and associate deans in posts at various very influential institutions across Chile that have really been very visionary and have had the confidence of their faculty to really drive some quite ambitious change. So I think that combination of the government saying this is what we want, encouraging people to really look outside Chile to see what's possible, but actually within those institutions or within key institutions, some deans that are really saying we're going to set ourselves apart here, we're going to do something very exciting, and bringing the faculty with them. Having said that, I think there are still a lot of challenges. And while there's a lot of enthusiasm, and particularly at the senior management level and the government level, that there's still a lot of resistance amongst core faculty to really make the change, and a lot of concerns about moving away from the traditional curriculum. So I think they've got a lot of challenges ahead. But actually, the distance travelled really has been quite impressive across the country.
And where do you find the challenges? Are the challenges at the institutional level, or are the challenges at the national level?
I think both. I think the institutions have challenges, and particularly this issue of faculty buy-in. In Chile, they're moving from very long curricula. On paper, 6-year curricula, but actually in practice, most engineering undergraduates would take 8 or 9 years to complete their studies. And actually moving away from that and changing the curriculum, but also reducing the curriculum is a real problem. And what some of the institutions have been doing is adding, rather than saying we're changing and moving to a new curriculum, we're just putting more pieces in, but we're not going to pull anything away because people find that too difficult. And actually the curricula becomes more and more packed. And I think that's a real challenge. But I think there's challenges also at a national level. So, for example, the way that the government has funded higher education has been very competitive in Chile, and institutions are very much used to competing against one another for that funding, and actually creating a culture across the country where people share ideas and support change across different institutions, I think is very difficult. And I think there's also been a divide between industry and higher education, and very little collaboration between those two sectors from industry in terms of informing, what do they need from graduates, but also from universities working with industry to actually immerse some of these authentic experiences into the curriculum. And I think that's another challenge at a national level, is for that dialogue to really set up between industry and higher education, because there's a huge amount of potential there.
Okay. Do you have any good examples of what then have happened at the classroom level, at the ground level?
There are some really lovely examples. One example is the Factoría from a university in the north of Chile, and this is actually an example of a bottom-up change, which has been fabulous. And it started from the students and a small group of faculty who wanted these authentic experiences in the curriculum, but also were thinking about the social impact of engineering and the extent to which engineering could really have a positive impact on rural communities. And they created this concept called the Factoría, where in the first instance, students came together outside the curriculum to solve real problems that were affecting communities locally, such as clay-fired ovens were being used in local pottery industries, but actually there was all sorts of issues to do with pollution and fumes from those ovens. And actually students working with these communities to improve the design and usage of these ovens. But actually this Factoría grew and has grown over the years, and now faculty are very involved with it. And actually faculty are starting to see the impact of these experiences on the students that are involved, and because of that starting to implement some of these techniques and some of these projects within the curriculum. So I think that's been a really lovely example of bottom-up change. I think another nice example is from Católica, the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile, based in Santiago, which is one of the universities involved in the government's 2030 project. And they've done some very interesting developments connected with entrepreneurship. So in the third year of study, they have a full cohort, so all 700 students in the third year of study across all of engineering study on this entrepreneurship course. They're mentored by regional entrepreneurs, and they develop a prototype solution to a problem that's set regionally or nationally. So one challenge that was set was to do with urban fires. That is a particular problem in Chile. and they were working with the firefighting service, with victims of urban fires, to actually develop new ideas and prototype new ideas that could help the community. And these are cross-disciplinary experiences, hands-on experiences, and actually bringing in students from higher year groups. So students who have experienced the course the year before coming back and actually providing workshops on how to use Arduino, how to use prototyping materials. So it really is peer learning as well as learning from the community. So I think that's another really nice example of some of the changes that are happening.
Okay. Thank you very much.